Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Halo Sobat Literasi, selamat berjumpa kembali dengan saya Balik Literasi, berliterasi setiap hari.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. My name is Turul Iza Mulyani. My student number is 41, and my friend Literasi, her student number is 35, and we are from Group 10, and we are going to present our discussion about literature of the Renaissance and Enlightenment. Next. What is Renaissance or Enlightenment? Renaissance is a French term for rebirth. This era happened between the 14th to 17th century. This era is called the Renaissance because this era ushered in a return to the classical learning of ancient Greece and Rome and a flowering of the arts. Its focus on human potential led to the Enlightenment or Age of Reason. New ideas about government, science, and the arts paved the way for the modern world. Next. This is what are we going to learn in the Renaissance. First, the historical highlight, people and society, arts and culture, the legacy of the Renaissance and Enlightenment, and last, Sir Thomas More from Utopia. Next. The Renaissance era is divided into 5 periods. First is early Renaissance. Several conditions in early 14th century Italy made it fertile ground for a cultural revolution. First, cities grew and became powerful. Second, extensive trade promoted a lively exchange of ideas. Third, a successful merchant class had the time and money to support art and literature. Fourth, the heritage of ancient Greece and Rome inspired artists and thinkers. Philosophers and scholars who knew the ancient Latin and Greek masters often challenged traditional ways of thinking. New ideas spread like wildfire from city to city. Along with the factors that encouraged change, there was a powerful force opposing it. The church expected its members to be more concerned with heavenly than with worldly matters. Next. High Renaissance. When the Renaissance was at its height in Italy, citizens of Florence and Rome viewed their cities as rivals of ancient Athens. Princes, church leaders, and men of fortune dominated politics. These men sponsored artists such as Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and Raphael, who gave people new ways of looking at themselves. Next. Late Renaissance and Reformation. As the printing was helping to spread literacy and new ideas, impatient with church corruption was triggering a movement for religious reform, the Reformation. Beginning with the public protest of a German monk named Martin Luther in 1517, the movement spread across Europe. For decades, Protestants, led by Luther in Germany, John Calvin in France, and Henry VIII in England, fought Catholics. As the Pope's power declined, nations such as England and Spain took center stage. Next. Age of Kings. Convinced that they had a divine right to rule, monarchs sought and achieved absolute power. Philip II of Spain created a wealthy empire that stretched from Africa to the New World. Louis XIV made France the most powerful nation in Europe. But his lavish lifestyle and continual wars led to great suffering among his people. In Russia, Peter the Great turned what had been an isolated territory into a power competitive with other European nations. In England, the government, after a bloodless revolution, limited the power of the monarch. England created a constitutional monarchy, a form of government still used today. Next. Last days, age of enlightenment. During the Enlightenment, human concerns from government to personal happiness become subjects of wide-reaching philosophical thought. One English political thinker, Thomas Hobbes, concluded that a strong government was needed to control people's basically every nature. His countryman, John Locke, on the other hand, found people to be essentially good and able to govern themselves. Mary Wollstonecraft argued that women had as much potential as men. In France, thinkers such as Voltaire, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Baron de Montesquieu challenged long-held assumptions about the privilege of the upper class, the divine right of kings, and the authority of the church. Toward the end of the era, a new belief in the rights of the individual inspired revolution in America and France and helped change the course of Western civilization. Next. This is the people and society during the Renaissance era. There is aristocrats. In the Renaissance era, a membership in the aristocracy was not simply a matter of birth. Merchants who made their own fortune could be awarded titles and enjoy all the accompanying power. For instance, the Medici family of Florence who used their rich to promote culture rather than just their own welfare. And then there is clergy. Clergy are formal leaders within established religions. In the Renaissance era, they began to change their role as the winds of reform gathered force. For instance, Martin Luther in Germany brought about social change as they broke from the church. And then there is soldiers. The life of a soldier in the Renaissance and Enlightenment, as in other periods of history, was hard and often short. Becoming a soldier was no longer a passport to wealth and influence, as it had been in the Middle Age. The growth of professional armies group of soldiers who would work for the highest bidder made the work less prestigious. Next. The middle class, a business boom in the 16th century created not only a merchant aristocracy, but also a thriving middle class of people who made their livings in a variety of occupations. Craft, shopkeeping, manufacturing, banking, and trade offered ways for people to earn more money with less back-breaking effort than working the land. For the first time, even art and literature could provide their practitioners a living wage. And then last, there is peasants and farmers. Despite the social and economic changes during the Renaissance and Enlightenment, 4 out of every 5 people were still farmers. These peasants labored long hours on land they didn't own for the privilege of paying taxes to their lords. Even that was no release, since half their money often went to their masters when they died. Although some peasants become tenant farmers, laborers, or artisans, they seldom could escape the cycle of hard work and hardship that kept them in poverty. Next. This is the arts and culture during the Renaissance era. The philosophy and science, the development of the scientific method led to a totally new way of thinking about the natural world. For instance, the Polish scientist Nicolaus Copernicus that challenged the most basic idea about the universe that the Earth was at its center. His sun-centered model was later approved as true by Johannes Kepler and Galileo Galilei. During the Enlightenment, also known as the Age of Reason, philosophers shone the light of reason on everything from individual rights to government and social responsibilities. Next. Literature. In the Renaissance era, many writers increasingly relied on their native language, such as English, Spanish, and Italian. A spirit of experimentation greatly influenced the literature of the era. In the 14th century, Giovanni Boccaccio paved the way for the new genre of the novel. Another genre, lyric poetry, was practiced by writers throughout Europe. Dramatists such as Shakespeare and Oliver Goldsmith also provide popular entertainment to an increasingly literate public. The literature of the late 17th and 18th centuries is sometimes called neoclassical because it reflects the order and restraint that marked the literature of ancient Rome. Next. Painting, sculpture, and architecture. The new way of looking at the world that developed in the Renaissance drastically affected the way visual artists portrayed. They devised new techniques based on classical Greek and Roman ideals of proportion. For instance, Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo did anatomical studies that help artists create realistic figures. As sculptors and architects, Da Vinci, Donatello, and Michelangelo brought technical mastery of proportion to near perfection. Next, this slide will be presented by my friend Larasati.
Okay, thank you, Nurul. For the next, I will explain the music during the Renaissance era. It divided into three periods. In Renaissance, sacred music was joined by new forms reflecting national taste. New types of instrumental music also developed, often for the lute. In Baroque, it showed experimentation, complex melodies, and dance rhythms. In this era, drama and music were blended in opera, a new form. And last, classical, where the composers made use of tightly structured rhythms and melodies. Franz Joseph Haydn and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart were two of the leading composers. The leading instrument was the piano. And the legacy of the Renaissance and Enlightenment. In terms of mass communication, the beginnings of the communication explosion in our contemporary world can be traced to the Renaissance and Enlightenment. The printing press made books affordable, and the resulting increase in literacy helped to usher in mass communication. Magazines and newspapers informed the masses and helped shape public opinion. In terms of human rights, the term human rights originated in the 20th century, but the concept has roots in the Renaissance and Enlightenment. Bills of Rights in England, France, and the United States were intended to protect individual rights and freedoms. These important documents influence today activists who seek to protect the safety and liberty of peoples around the world. In terms of science and medicines, modern science and medicine owe a great deal to the scientific discoveries of the Renaissance and Enlightenment. In the 17th century, for example, the British physician William Harvey discovered the secrets of circulation of blood. In terms of mathematics and engineering, the electronic world that we know today with its graphing, calculators, DVDs, computers, and the internet has its origins in the Renaissance and Enlightenment. The French philosopher and the mathematician Blaise Pascal created a calculating machine in 1642. Next, I will explain about one of the most important figures during Renaissance era. Sir Thomas More was born in London and lived from 1477 to 1535. He was a lawyer, humanist, statesman, and author, as well as an advisor to King Henry VIII. More studied at Oxford University, where he learned Latin, word comedies, and studied Greek literature. Then he studied law before standing for election in Parliament in 1504. Thomas More was a devout Catholic. He saw the Protestant Reformation as being evil and dangerous. He believed that the Catholic Church was the only true church. He is also famous for writing Utopia, published in 1516. It is about the political system on an imaginary island. The name has been used to describe a perfect society ever since, and Utopia is one of the most influential books ever written. Next, I will explain about the literary work of Sir Thomas More, Utopia. The word Utopia came from the two Greek words means no place, nowhere, or an imaginary place. In the first book, Thomas More arrives in Antwerp on a business trip where he runs into an old friend, Peter Giles, and meets a new friend, Raphael Hytloday. Hytloday is a great traveler and has all sorts of controversial opinions, so the three men start chat about whether or not it is possible for philosophy to influence politics. Giles and Moore say it totally is, whereas Hyde insists that politics and philosophy are implacable. He ends by just randomly mentioning this place called Utopia, and Giles and Moore ask him to say more. After taking a little lunch break, the trio returns in second book to chat about Utopia. Hyde essentially describes topic by topic various characteristics of this new island. And next, I will explain about the society in Utopia. In terms of geography, Utopia is an island and so has no problems with contended borders. In terms of community, towns are well planned and there are no hovels. Everyone has an adequate housing with a garden in which to grow vegetables for the family, and everyone is well trained in farming. In terms of family, Ethiopian society is well ordered with traditional family structure and elders who are heads of household much respected. In terms of marriage, women do not marry before 18 and men marry at 22. Premarital sex is severely punished. In terms of education, all children are given a good education and adults give up free time to assist in education. In terms of social structure and organization, Utopia is a rationally structured society. It is a peaceful and harmonious and there is a minimum conflict. And in terms of law, minimal law and there's no lawyers. Premarital sex, prostitution, adultery, gambling, theft, and drunkenness are outlawed and severely punished. In terms of people and war, Utopians have no interest in territorial expansion and make no alliances with other nations. They are basically pacifists, but they will fight in defensive conflicts if necessary, preferring to employ soldiers to do the actual fighting and where possible to outwit their enemies and thus avoid bloodshed. In terms of work, all Utopians work willingly and only need to work 6 hours a day. Everyone does some farming and so is a food producer. They have no interest in luxury, fashion, gold, or jewels, and no interest in accumulating wealth. Greed is not known amongst them. And last, in terms of property and economics, Utopians do not use money as they do not trade and they work for the common good. The life is similar to Marx's dictum, to everyone according to his needs, from everyone according to his abilities. So Hedlode finishes his description and Moore explains that after so much talking, Giles and Hedlode and he were too tired to discuss the particular points of utopian society. The narrative now returns to Moore's first-person experience, and he thinks that many aspects of utopia sound completely absurd, especially the fact that they all live communally. And Moore ends by saying that there are some good things about the utopian way of life, but is skeptical they will ever appear in Europe. And for the reflection, Renaissance art completely revitalized the entire concept of art in Europe. It branched out beyond the merely religious purpose of medieval artwork, and it reflected a new humanist philosophy, and it engaged with its viewer in a novel yet natural way that had not been done since the end of the classical period. I think that's all for our presentation. Thank you for watching. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.